Welcome to the Lucidez podcast, where I explore everything, because I believe in the infinite, unbounded potential within each of us. This is Shelley, a fellow seeker and a lover of life's mysteries. I invite you to join me and explore your uncharted depths. In the previous episode, I offered a simple lesson I learned from nature, and that is seeds grow. They grow in soil, and they grow in the mind. No matter where these seeds grow, they form complex networks, and we call them roots. And it's those roots I'd like to talk about today. You see, roots are tricky. When you dig them up, you never know where you'll end up. Sometimes I discover an entirely different root system. Other times I get stuck and I can't move forward. In the end, roots always lead me to my truth. Roots never lie. And that's what I'm sharing today. 3 of my roots. Roots which were unhealthy and caused problems in my life. The first root is a shallow root. The second, a mid-depth root. And the third is what I call a deeper than sky root. Before we dig into roots, I'm going to quickly review the last episode. First, every impulse is a seed. This means we need to pay attention to the environments that we expose ourselves to. Second, seeds grow if you give them attention, emotion, and repetition. This means we need to be aware of our thoughts and where we place our attention. And third, the mind can adapt, change, grow, and even die, which means we are the gardeners of our minds and our lives. These 3 sum up the previous episode, so if they don't make sense, I encourage you to listen to that episode and then return here. Now, let's talk about roots. When I decide to dig for a root, I start by letting go of the outcome, because I have no idea what I'll find. I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know when I'll actually reach the end of the root. That's why it's important that I'm curious every step of the way, and I'm patient. I've learned that baby steps mature into marathons. Baby steps mature into marathons. I thought up this affirmation when my life felt like a marathon, and my steps were too tiny to see. I mention this because I want you to remember that every effort you make on your own behalf for your well-being and health, every step matters, and every step equals big change. No effort is ever wasted when it's on your own behalf. Baby steps are essential when digging for roots, because the root of my problem reveals my oldest, deepest fears, my pains, and my traumas. So it's important to take baby steps when I'm dealing with roots. Some roots are so ancient, they are no longer wood. They're petrified. And I'm petrified of them. So I dig slow. I take my time. I explore the wisdom of each root, because old fears and pains and traumas need to be integrated and composted, and these require thoughtful digging. So I dig a little and then I pause. I tap the root, I listen, I hear echoes and whispers, sometimes wisdom or guidance. I dig a little more. I tap the root again, and I feel I feel the emotions that I fear. I breathe, I dig a little, I tap again. I ask questions. What can I learn from this root? What emotion is associated with this root? How can I integrate or transform or compost or dissolve this ancient rooted story? And there's always one question I love, one which Byron Katie so cleverly asks. Who am I without this story, without this root? Who am I without this story? The process that I'm describing here is part science and part spirituality. The science is called neuroplasticity and epigenetics. The spirituality is called integration and healing. I found that bridging these two, science and spirit, is the keystone of my healing journey. The keystone, the center stone in an arch, the one which allows it to bear weight. This is where my deepest healing occurs, at the keystone, the place where I embrace the logical, rational universe and the mystical, mysterious universe. Anytime I dig for roots, I'm delving into the unknown. So I automatically invite the mystical and mysterious. I'm also inviting my ancestors, plus any unseen forces surrounding me at the time. At the same time, I'm also inviting the logical and rational aspects of my physical being. That's why the keystone of my bridge is always about connecting science with spirit, the physical with the spiritual. What I found is this is how I'm beginning to live beyond my physical birthright, beyond what I was born into. And I'm moving toward a life that's aligned with my spiritual birthright. I believe I'm more than what I was born with and born as. I believe there are all kinds of spiritual enhancements that are available to every one of us. It just requires us to do some digging, to look at the roots that aren't healthy in our lives. And I want to mention something that always happens when I dig up my own roots. And that is, I feel lonely, like part of me is isolated from life. This loneliness is a shadow. It's one that I can recall being with me for as long as I remember. I believe it belongs to a time before my time, a trauma from my ancestors, but I don't really know where trauma begins. What I do know is where trauma ends, and that's with me, here and now. This is where all trauma ends, here and now. It ends by digging up old roots and facing the truth. So here's my first root. It's a shallow one. And shallow roots are easy to dig. They're easy to understand and easy to uproot. It began at the local swimming pool when someone was rude to me about the way I was swimming. They yelled at me to get out of the lane because I was in their way and I was doing it wrong. When they yelled at me, my whole body began to shake and I was terrified something bad was going to happen. But I stayed. This was a big moment for me. I didn't run away. I stayed. I decided that if I was truly doing something wrong, the lifeguards would tell me. So I continued shaking and I kept swimming. It was hard to focus on swimming because I was so sure something bad was about to happen. Nothing happened, except that person kept up their tirade every time they saw me swimming. And I continued shaking and feeling afraid that I was going to get in trouble. After a few days of this, I decided to follow the root of my fear, and it led me to a double-pronged belief. The first was that I wasn't worthy enough to do my own thing, to take up space, to be in someone's way. The second was that if I get in someone's way, I am getting in big trouble. I was initially sad when I discovered this double-pronged belief living inside of me. I knew intellectually it was a lie, but my body told me a different story. My body had been programmed to believe this root. I wasn't sure how to help myself, so I decided to practice believing and living my worth. So each day before I went swimming, I told myself I had a right to swim, to take up space, and not get in trouble for it. At first, I didn't believe anything I told myself. I faked it for weeks, and my body kept shaking every time I saw the person. And then, after a few weeks of practice, my body quit shaking. And a little bit longer, I started to believe what I told myself. I had every right to swim, to take up space, and not get in trouble for it. The irony is that about this same time, out of the clear blue, the person walked up to me. I was unsure of their motive, so I froze, preparing for another tirade, but they spoke slowly and said, "We got off on the wrong foot. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said what I did. Can we start over?" I stared numbly as they continued. I was having a bad day. I work with trauma survivors, and I heard some hard stories that day. I just needed a good swim, and you were in my way. That was it. They had a bad day, bad enough to irritate them into an extended weeks-long tirade, bad enough that it triggered my belief of worth for weeks. Isn't it amazing, in hindsight? One person had a bad day, they behaved poorly, and then both of us played it out for weeks. When I saw this, I realized how essential my emotional maturity is. I don't need the other person to apologize in order for me to stop playing the role of victim. I didn't need to drag it out in my head and my heart, but I did. Every time I saw them, I watered a seed of negativity in my head. I wasn't conscious of this at first, but then I began to feel as negative as the other person behaved, and I knew I was responsible for my negativity. Let me show you what I mean. Here's an experiment, and you can pause if you need to stop what you're doing, and then resume. In this experiment, we're going to use our awareness. I'd like you to be aware that you are aware. Now, direct your awareness to a memory. Choose a memory which is joyful and loving and fulfilling. Be aware of this joyful memory. Now let's play. Play with your joyful memory. Can you move closer to your memory? Can you go inside? Can you look at it from different angles? How does your body feel while you are aware of your joyful, loving memory? Now, release this memory. Let's begin again. Be aware that you are aware. Direct your awareness to a memory and choose one that is troubling, negative, painful. Be aware of your troubling memory. Now, let's play. Play with your troubling memory. Can you move closer to your memory? Can you go inside? Can you view it from different angles? How does your body feel while you're aware of this troubling memory? How does your body feel when you play with this troubling memory? Now release this memory. And I have 2 questions for you. Do thoughts affect how you feel? Do thoughts affect your body? For me, a joyful thought feels joyful in my body, while a troubling thought feels troubling, which means my negative thoughts about the other person felt negative in my body. And I believe they created negative energy in my body. This happens because every thought has energy, and energy has mass. I speak about this in my podcast concerning Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared. You can check that out if you'd like to deepen your understanding of how thoughts create and affect matter. The reason I point this out is because a negative thought never grows joy. And this is a blessing. It means that when we tend our minds, our thoughts, our lives, we can grow what we wish to grow. And after all was said and done at the swimming pool, I did integrate this old root, this belief of worth. I did it by utilizing both science and spirit. The science side of this has two components. I used affirmations and awareness. The first affirmations, I have a right to be here. I have a right to take up space. I am worthy. I value myself. I spoke these over and over again, and these began to rewire my brain. They slowly connected the old belief to the areas of my brain that know wholeness and belonging. The second part, awareness, I allowed myself to feel my body, to be present with the fear and the shaking and the uncertainty. Allowing myself to feel my body is another way to rewire my brain. It tells my brain that it's okay to feel the fear and the shaking, that nothing bad is happening. The spiritual aspect of my healing came from the time I spent digging, time with my internal world, connecting to my deep knowing that I truly have worth, regardless of what I do or do not do. I am worthy. All of this took the time it took, which is how much time it always takes. Healing and integrating and rewiring takes the time it takes. So don't get caught in the trap of how long something should take. My second root is mid-depth. A mid-depth root is painful to dig, a challenge to face, and too deep to uproot. The mid-depth root I speak of began when I was quite young. It began when I overheard comments by boys and men, and I listened to girls whispering, and I leaned in close, and I heard women compare. This is how I learned, no, how I knew, that men love women with fabulous breasts. I was young when I planted this seed, this belief. I didn't understand that it wasn't mine. I didn't understand that I had a choice to believe or not believe it. I thought if everyone else said it, it must be true. So I planted this seed and I watered this seed over and over. I watered this seed with worry and fear, with grief and envy, and eventually self-loathing. As I matured, I watched my breasts for signs of love, but they didn't grow into the fabulous shape I was told equaled love. I was deeply concerned, so I watered the seed every day. I watered it with worry and fear and grief and envy and self-loathing, and that seed did exactly as I instructed. It grew a very deep root of worry, fear, grief, envy, self-loathing. If you recall, the mind needs three things in order to change. They are attention, emotion, and repetition. These are the trifecta of neuroplasticity, of change. But change can be healthy or unhealthy, and in this case, it was unhealthy, and it grew an unhealthy root in my head. Perhaps this sounds trivial, but this root was a very real problem for me because it shackled my attempts at love beyond physical appearance. And my problem only magnified after I gave birth to my beautiful children. After pregnancy and breastfeeding, my motherhood breasts didn't fit any shape society told me was love. I became so conflicted and desperate to be loved that I inserted silicone into my chest, which got me loads of attention, but not love. So I removed them, and that left me with what I had buried, the painful belief that fabulous breasts are necessary for love. This is when my digging began. It took a few years for me to reach the end, and I employed many modalities of healing, but there is one which may surprise you. It was the final one I employed, and that is sorrow. Sorrow was my final healer. I still remember the day I chose to heal with sorrow. I actually remember more than that. I remember the place, the time, the pale sunlight streaming into the loft where my partner and I lay on rumpled sheets. Within that tiny moment, he made a comment about my breasts. This is when I allowed sorrow to join me, to lay beside me in the pale sunlight. I allowed myself to feel sorrow, the deep sorrow of men's opinions of my breasts, the sorrow for a lie which became a truth until I finally saw it for what it was, a societal burden, a lie about breasts and love. As sorrow lay beside me, we began our healing journey together. Days, weeks, months went by, and I felt immense loneliness. That's when I called my 3 energetic friends to join. Kindness, courage, resilience. My friends and I stood together. We looked upon the lie, we saw the truth, and we whispered over and over, I love my beautiful breasts. My partners love my beautiful breasts. These words were new seeds, and I tended the hell out of them. I spoke them every day, over and over. I love my beautiful breasts. My partners love my beautiful breasts. Eventually my seeds grew into truth, and today I love my beautiful breasts, as do those with whom I choose to share. As for that old root, the one which began in my childhood, it was too big for me to remove, so nature slowly composted it. All I did was stop giving it the essentials: attention, emotion, repetition. And today I wouldn't plant the seed because I no longer bear the burden of lies. I only plant seeds of truth. Before I share the last root, the deeper than sky root, I want to speak about trauma. Trauma may be personal, ancestral, generational, societal, cultural, you name it. But rarely does trauma exist in just one area. Trauma spans this complex network between the seen, the unseen, the past, the present, the future. And each type of trauma requires a slightly different approach in order to integrate and heal. The one I'm going to speak about now is a personal trauma, but it does have ancestral ties, so there will be overlap. So the main issue with healing personal trauma is that it's isolated in the nervous system. And here's a simplified version of why this happens. When a traumatic event occurs, large areas of the nervous system shut down. They turn off. This is a healthy response for an overwhelmed nervous system. What this means is that the experience, the event, and the memory is stored in only a small part of the brain, of the body, of the nervous system. Only the areas that are still accessible or online. Due to this isolation, the experience or memory is unable to connect to the healthy areas of the brain, the areas which are adept at integration, titration, learning, and growing. It's important to remember that each of us is a living network. Our brain, our gut, our body, our nervous system, our organs, we are a living network. This personal, living network. We're also more. We have an external or communal living network, that of our family, our community, our society, and with nature. These networks are essential to our health, and nature teaches us this. We need reciprocity and connection in our lives. They are essential to well-being, to health, and to wholeness. So if an experience is isolated in our mind, it is disconnected not only from our personal wisdom, but also from the communal or collective wisdom, and from being able to understand and connect with others. And possibly we feel isolated, just like our trauma, or like a fracture of pain. But we don't need to remain this way. We can connect the experience, the trauma, to our own healthy nervous system and to the communal nervous system. We do this through internal healing and through external healing, and we utilize both science and spirit. Let me mention a few ways. Epigenetics means we choose healthy environments. Our food, our water, our music, our friends, our home, our partners. With neuroplasticity, we're aware of our thoughts. We let flow the unhealthy ones, and we practice and repeat the healthy ones. With spirituality, we explore all types of modalities of healing, like meditation or therapy or dance, yoga, plant medicine, sound therapy, ancestral healing. I encourage you to study and utilize all different types of modalities because each one has a unique effect on the nervous system, on the mind, the body, the heart, and the spirit. What I'm describing here is healing at the physical level and the energetic level, healing with science and healing with spirit. Before I go on, I want to share an interesting correlation between science and spirit. The study of epigenetics reveals an ancient indigenous wisdom. We are linked to our grandparents. Both the science of epigenetics and indigenous spiritual wisdom teach us that we are linked to our grandparents. And this holds true in my life. My grandmother has been a guiding spirit to me for many years, even though she died when I was quite young and I barely knew her. The beautiful thing to me about this is that we see quite clearly that science and spirit unite. They unite to support healing at the genetic and the ancestral level. This is very good news for me because I have been blessed with more than one ancestral trauma, more than one deeper than sky root. And I'm not alone in this. I know my ancestral trauma isn't unique. It's actually quite ordinary. The only thing extraordinary is the amount of time I've spent digging and examining and crying and gnashing and courageously sitting with my deeper than sky roots. Okay, now how exactly do I recognize a deeper than sky root and ancestral trauma? For me, the telltale signs are hijacked and hypnotized. When my ancestral trauma gets triggered, I am nowhere to be found. I've been hijacked and hypnotized by a past far older than my lifetime. And along with this, I likely have experienced this trauma in my own lifetime. I'm starting to believe that ancestral trauma repeats itself, not only through my genes, but also through my lived experience. I think this explains why two people can experience the same event, and one walks away while the other is emotionally or mentally crippled. You see, if we are already traumatized by our ancestors' experiences, we have no room to have our own experience. We are hijacked by their experience, by their memories which have been passed down through genes. Let me pause and explain what I'm saying because I don't know anyone else saying this, but I think it's coming. I believe that ancestral trauma repeats itself genetically and through lived experience. We know the first part of my statement is true through epigenetics and indigenous wisdom. Our grandparents passed their genes on to us, traumatized and all. The second part of my statement hasn't been proven, but I've seen it in my life and others. We repeat patterns. I have experienced the same traumas that my ancestors experienced. It's like my genes push me to replay their trauma, but not for nothing. They want to be healthy. They, meaning my genes and my ancestors. This may sound weird. I mean, do genes think? Do they want to be healthy? I believe they do. I believe nature is always seeking health and balance, which means a gene may dictate an experience in order to heal itself, and thereby heal us, which ripples out to our ancestors. Did I just say that genes could dictate an experience? Are genes that smart? Well, they are very, very old, and they are the blueprint of life. And they do have enormous control of how our bodies and minds behave. So I think genes may be smarter than we realize. I believe they want to heal, to be healthy. Plus, our genes connect us to our ancestors. Do they want to be healthy? Is it so far-fetched to imagine that our ancestors wish for healing? Healing for us and by proxy for them? Now, I'm not saying that you have to experience your ancestors' trauma in order to heal ancestral trauma. What I'm saying is that this has sometimes been true in my life. I've experienced some of the same trauma as my ancestors. Spiritually speaking, people call this fate or destiny or a life path. Scientifically speaking, people call this gene expression or heredity. So is anything that I'm saying true, or is it false? I don't have an answer for you either way. I'm just playing with the mystery of what I know. And from where I stand today, I would say that trauma is the meeting of physical and spiritual. It's the place where the seen world and the unseen world connect, here and now, to integrate, to heal, to renew. This is the keystone I spoke of in the beginning, where we gather science and spirit, here and now, the physical and energetic. This is where everything happens, here and now. My deeper than sky root expresses itself as terror of abandonment, and I'm not alone in this. My mother was so terrified of abandonment, she desperately wished she were a Siamese twin. She literally wished she were physically attached to another human being. She hated anything resembling isolation or separateness, whether it was physical or emotional. I feel fortunate that my inheritance is to a lesser degree. I simply have a terrible fear of abandonment, which isn't the same as being alone. I love solitude. I spend hours with myself, meditating, hiking, writing. But when I am close to someone, certain events trigger an irrational fear of abandonment. It's generally one of three events. The person is not physically present when I expect them to be. They are not emotionally present when I expect them to be, or they're not energetically present for any reason. Each of these situations I experienced as a child. My parents were not physically present for much of my childhood. They were not emotionally present for much of my childhood. And they were not energetically present. They were hollow shells of protection. But this didn't begin with my parents. I see the tailings of previous generations. They are strewn about my parents' childhoods. Their behavior wasn't safe and secure. and I'm sure they weren't the first. So this root is old. It's deeper than any midnight sky. For you to understand how this root affects me, I'd like to describe how it feels, this terror of abandonment. I would start with the words small and helpless. Then I'd say, an endless night without moon, danger everywhere. Then I'd use the words whipping winds and freezing rain, with nowhere to go, forever and ever. I feel as though forever has captured me, and I will always be helpless, always drowning in rain and darkness, always lonely. This is an awful trait, and I'm sorry to have it. I'm also grateful that after decades of digging and integrating and healing, I've altered the expression of this gene so it appears less often, and it isn't to the severity it once was. But how exactly did I do this? How did I stop repeating ancestral patterns? How did I stop fertilizing these roots which extend beyond the inscrutable sky? My first step in healing any root is always the same. I ask for help. I begin by asking my ancestors because what I'm experiencing likely stems from their life. I believe they understand what I'm going through. I believe they wish to support and assist me. I believe they wish to heal alongside me. And I believe that together, they and I, the unseen and seen, can do far more than I can do alone. Perhaps we can do a miracle. After asking my ancestors for help, I ask folks in the physical realm, both for personal and professional. But I don't ask just anyone. I ask people who understand self-responsible healing. If you're unsure what I mean by these words, self-responsible healing, you may want to listen to the episode called Healing You, Not Your Therapist. Now, after asking ancestors and other folks for help, I ask everything else, and I mean everything. Plants, animals, fungi, minerals, crystals, spirit guides, clouds, rain, wind, dirt, seeds, roots, you name it, I've asked it. Because I believe E equals mc squared, Einstein's equation. I believe everything is energy, energy waiting for creation. Once I've asked everything I can think of for help, I take responsibility for my environment, my physical environment, healthy eating, daily exercise, journaling, solitude, companionship, and plenty of rest. My mental environment, breath, awareness, meditation, neuroplasticity, positive affirmations, and plenty of creativity. My emotional environment, curiosity, wonder, awe, beauty, sorrow, love, and plenty of joy. My spiritual environment, prayer, ceremony, song, sacred rituals, dance, and plenty of faith. I am deeper than any midnight sky, and I know my time here is precious. I'm not a helpless, hapless victim. I have innate healing mechanisms in my body, in my mind, in my soul. And healing in the physical realm ripples into the energetic realm, and vice versa, which means my healing ripples to my ancestors, and their healing ripples to me. This is sacred reciprocity, the giving and receiving. There are no physical properties to it, yet it is known and felt by my essential nature. There are still so many mysteries when it comes to digging roots. I probably have left you with more answers than questions, but what I do know is that it takes time to glean wisdom from each root. So I encourage you to dig with thoughtfulness and to tend to yourself with care. And if you remember nothing else, remember that you are the gardener of your mind, of your life, of your dreams, and you do not need to fear your roots. They will only lead you to your truth. And never forget, baby steps mature into marathons. I leave you here with tireless faith, persistence of mind, and dedication of body. I bid you farewell. Thank you for exploring with me on the Lucidess podcast. It is my hope that you discovered new wisdom within yourself and are inspired to live your unique strokes of genius.